Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jennifer Voigtchild, the U.S. Military Academy Command Historian, and I will be assisted today by Cadet Devin Smith, a history major from the class of 2024, and Cadet Matusz Bojarczyk from the class of 2025, one of our cadets here from Poland in the four-year International Cadet Program. To start off today's event, we will hear from Lieutenant General Steve Gillen, the 61st Superintendent of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Sir?
You threw me, okay. He threw me off here. I had it going, and now I'm all out of sync now. No, this is pretty cool. I mean, think about it. When's the last time a time capsule has been opened here, Jen? Never, exactly. This is a first. And so, and by the way, nobody has any idea what's inside of it. All right, so legitimately, this is the first time you all are here, going to see it along with all of us. I do want to say, you know, there's a few folks we talk about for help here. We talk about the museum, the Department of History, all right, the garrison, AOG. There's a bunch of different teammates that have been involved in putting all this together. And really, it all started with the destruction of Kosciuszko's monument as they're tearing it down, and then they, lo and behold, what do you see in here? But they see this box. It's like, hey, stop all work. We got to figure out what's going on here. And this is what we've come to. It's a really exciting moment, and I appreciate everybody coming in and joining us. There's folks coming in the back door. Find a seat, and we're going to all see what's in it together. There's probably some pretty cool music that we'll put to it, and I guarantee you it's going to be better than Geraldo, okay? All right. Dean, you're up.
We'll see, sir. I mean, you just made the promise, not me. Hey, so welcome, everybody. I'm just going to let you all know I'm extraordinarily excited about today. Have been for months. Welcome to the opening of and this is how I say his name, Kosciuszko. I looked it up in Google. There's a lot of different ways to say his name. That's what I can say because it's 3 syllables, so I'm sticking with it. But welcome to the opening of his time capsule. I know you're very excited about the big moment. I know you are. But just like any awards ceremony, or like a Selection Sunday March Madness bracket reveal, you have to hear some people talk first to let it build up. And I'm one of those people. And I got dressed up, the soup didn't, so I'm gonna talk for a little bit longer. That's what I'm gonna do. Okay, here you go. There are a couple of options when we open this time capsule, right? Option number 1, we open it, and there's nothing. Like the soup said, very similar to when Geraldo Rivera opened Al Capone's vault on live TV. I was told yesterday if we had a sense of humor, we would have asked Mr. Rivera to be up here with us. And I was like, we should have done that. Option 2, we open it, we reach our hand in, there's just dust. Very much like Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Except we don't want the angel of death to come out and melt our faces off. So we're gonna hope for not that one. Then here's number 3. There's some amazing historic artifacts. Something we didn't even know or think about. So I don't know what that could be, so we went on social media and we asked people what they thought, and here are the top 5 answers that I got. Sylvanus Thayer's ungraded WPRs are in that box. Here's my favorite, the original recipe for West Point's corn chowder. That's one. A map of the steam tunnels that lead from the soup's house, or a map of the steam tunnels leading to the soup's house. I like that one. This is just weird. A pair of Ulysses S. Grant's beard trimmers. And this one has no relevance to the time period. As some late night, as seen on TV items, you could only find in some obscure locations like a Ginsu knife, a Snuggie, a Showtime rotisserie, a Thigh Master. Those were all guesses, just so you know. Honorable mention was from a cadet, clearly a bit confused by the time period, a thumb drive with some lost Bitcoin. Okay? I talked to my daughter. This is what my daughter thought. She's like, Dad, I hope we open that thing and there's a map to another time capsule. And when we open that time capsule, it leads us to the Declaration of Independence, which we have to creatively look at to find a map to the famed city of El Dorado. The plot of National Treasure, everybody. The plot of National Treasure, my daughters. I actually am hoping for something a little bit different. I'm hoping that we open it and there's something in there like the Terminator arm, which shows that time travel is possible. John Connor is the humanity savior, and that ChatGPT is the beginning of Skynet, and we're all getting prepared. That's what I'm hoping for. Okay, I do have to take a few moments before we open it to talk about why this time capsule has so much significance for West Point and really our nation. It is an incredible story. This does not happen very often, if ever. That involves so many of West Point's heroes and so many of our academy heroes and our Army's heroes and really our nation. So I know our cadets and tremendous faculty are going to give the full details of the story of Thaddeus Kościuszko, but I want to highlight just a few things that it's just so impactful about this individual and what this represents. In case you don't know, Thaddeus Kościuszko was a contemporary of our founding fathers. He was revered by George Washington. Like the George Washington revered this guy. Personal friends with Thomas Jefferson. In fact, he might as well have been a founding father. He did everything except be in Philadelphia when the Declaration was signed. He is literally interwoven into the history of the United States. He has a statue in Washington, D.C.'s Lafayette Park and Boston's Public Garden, where in that statue he is actually holding the plans for, anyone want to take a guess? West Point, right? His house in Philadelphia is a national memorial. And then if you go into Jefferson Hall, the first floor of the library, and you look, there's a statue of Thomas Jefferson. And if you go to the sixth floor in the Hague Room, there's a portrait by the famous artist Thomas Sully from 1822. And both of those, Thomas Jefferson is wearing a big fur jacket. Anyone want to guess who that was a gift from? That's right, Thaddeus Kościuszko. Jefferson said of Kościuszko, he's as pure a son of liberty as I have ever known. So let me start our tale. All right, here we go. Right there. Go back about 275 years. 275 years, okay? In 1746, that's when Kościuszko was born in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, where he attended the Royal Knight School in Warsaw, a university that emphasized military subjects and the liberal arts. Sounds familiar. He had a strong passion for freedom, equality, and his considerable military and engineering skills would eventually bring him to the United States in that most seminal of years, 1776. His path during the Revolutionary War would intersect with West Point's in 1778 when General George Washington put him in charge of strengthening what was considered the most important military fortification in the Americas, West Point. His plan for strongholds like Fort Clinton and Fort Putnam were widely praised as innovative, and he continued his service in the Continental Army, fighting under General Nathaniel Greene in the South. And throughout the war, he carried a sword. And in his sword, there was an inscription. And this inscription is incredibly impactful to me. It said, "Do not draw me without reason. Do not sheathe me without honor." He would then return to Europe after our Revolutionary War, fight many years for Polish independence, and is today recognized as a national hero in Poland, Belarus, Lithuania, and the United States. While he was back, as he got back to Poland, he started to think about his own experiences. He started to advocate to his very good friend Thomas Jefferson for a military academy for American officers. And he wrote his close friend Thomas Jefferson many times on this topic. In many ways, at the early onset of the academy, it was Thaddeus Kościuszko, who was the father of the academy. After his death in 1817, and our team will spend much time talking about it, that's when the monument to this great patriot and patron was put up. And that monument was completed in 1829. So let me just fast forward to 2021 when a cadet named Eric Kramer is going out by Kościuszko's monument, and he gets there and he sees some cracks in its foundation. And he notifies the appropriate personnel, and that's when the statue was removed for safety precautions. Of course, by the way, as soon as that cadet saw that and he notified some people, it was like our entire civil and mechanical engineering department pulled a fire, like, hey, it's code red, it's Super Bowl time, put on hard hats and went out with flashlights and little belts with all types of things on them. They were very excited about checking about the foundation and the soil beneath it. Which brings us to last May, just a few months ago. And there, the time capsule was discovered inside the base of the old pedestal, as the soup just laid out. That thing has been sitting undisturbed for 194 years right here at West Point. I can't help but think of what has happened since the monument and the time capsule were put in place so long ago. And in so many ways, Thaddeus Kościuszko, through this time capsule and his monument, has been watching over us through these many, many centuries. In doing so, he's watched this military academy that he advocated for and he championed to Thomas Jefferson grow into the world's preeminent leadership institution. He has watched as it has never failed to produce the leaders of character our nation needs in its most critical moments. He's watched them run to the sound of guns in every war our nation has fought. He's watched our graduates fight a bloody civil war that would help us endure as one conceived in liberty and a nation dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He's watched the United States step onto the world stage as a fledgling superpower after the Spanish-American War. And he's watched his graduates led doughboys to fight for a just and stable peace in Europe so that the world would be fit and safe to live in. He has watched our graduates fight to liberate Europe from the tyranny of fascism, rebuild a war-torn continent, and has stood with our NATO allies ready to defend it against the aggression of communism. He watches our graduates island hopped across the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, led to the creation of world-defining new weapons, and brought a lasting peace to and with Japan. And he's watched the skies above as 5 graduates walk the surface of the moon, braving the unknown and the hardship to lead mankind to the stars. He also watched, as recently as 105 graduates, stretching from the class of 1979 to the class of 2011, deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan and fulfilled their oaths to the core and to their country of living, serving, and dying with honor. And in full circle, he's watched our most recent graduates deploy to Poland to a base named after him, dedicated by our 60th superintendent. And those graduates are stationed there at this very moment to reassure our Polish allies and all of our European allies that the friendship that he began over 2 centuries ago is unwavering, and our commitment to them is steadfast. In short, Thaddeus Kościuszko has watched as the country whose independence he fought for has become a shining light of liberty for those tired, poor, and huddled masses around the world who yearn to breathe free. That is the history of the Kościuszko Monument and this time capsule, the history of the academy he dreamed of, and the history of the country he bled for. So it's why today, it's not really what's important what's in there. Make no mistake, I hope it's cool. I hope it's awesome. I can't wait to see what's in there. But at the end of the day, what this is really about is an opportunity to reflect upon and be inspired by the history I've just briefly discussed, in which our faculty and cadets will spend some time discussing also. And to pause just for a few moments, just pause, right? And realize that we have the immense honor and responsibility to continue the legacy that he has started. This is clearly an extraordinary day at West Point. I'm obviously personally excited. But then, I thought about it this weekend. I really did, and I thought, to be honest, something special happens at West Point every single day. Every single day. Every single day something awesome is happening. Whether it's cadets working with faculty on solving the Army's most complex problems like artificial intelligence and hypersonic rockets, or it's coaches and teams pushing themselves to the very last second for victory on the pitch, field, diamond, or court, or it's attack, spending an extra hour at night talking and mentoring a cadet on possible branches and career paths. I believe West Point's living up to the vision that was established by Thaddeus Kościuszko so long ago. I know he'd be proud of today's academy and its core of cadets, which, like our Army, is drawn from across the United States, from every state and every single background. It's a citizen army that, like the inscription on his sword, does not fight to conquer or seek unnecessary conflict. It is an army that aspires to something more, to fight and win when called upon by its nation, while living up to the ideas and values like loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. But make no mistake, if called upon, these graduates will fight and win, but do so honorably. That is our charge here at West Point, and there is no better opportunity than today to take a moment and be inspired by our Army and Academy's connection through time, represented by that capsule, to one of our nation's true heroes, Thaddeus Kościuszko. Thank you for this chance to be part of this incredible moment, sir. Thanks to the team for being up here. Thank you, Jen, for all you've done. And I will now turn it over to the USMA Command historian as we continue to travel through time together.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your opening remarks. Also on stage with us today are, from your left to my right, to your right, our panel of senior historians specializing in early American history and memory from the USMA Department of History, Lieutenant Colonel Rory McGovern, Dr. Rob McDonald, Colonel Shawnigan Scully, and Dr. Sam Watson. Next to the panel are Chris Barth, USMA Director of Libraries and Archives, and Preservation Librarian Elaine McConnell. In the center is Paul Hudson, the West Point archaeologist, and Kevin Holtzlander from the West Point Garrison Department of Public Works. To their right is Michael Diaz and Marlena Cook, curators from the West Point Museum. And also helping us on and below stage are history majors Cadet Caroline Robinson, Cadet Gabriela Sorrentino, and Cadets Wojciech Wardyński and Kasper Wojgny from Poland. As you've heard, about 3 months ago, the base of the Kosciuszko Monument here at West Point was removed because it had some structural damage. In the process of that removal, an employee of the West Point Association of Graduates discovered a 12 by 12 by 13-inch box underneath the marble face of the monument. That box is here on stage with us today. We are guessing that is a sort of artifact, or what we would call today a time capsule, put there when the monument was completed in 1829. But why are we guessing? Because so far, our researchers have found no reference to a box, artifact, time capsule, or any other object being put inside the base. In fact, there is a bit of mystery surrounding the monument itself. We have always believed that it was erected in 1828 based on the cornerstone inscription, but our recent research leads us to believe that the monument itself was not completed until 1829. More on that later. Paul, you've done a thorough inspection of the box. What have you found?
So as Jen mentioned, the box is approximately 1 cubic foot in volume. It is made entirely of lead with solder seams. It seems to be very basic construction, a folded body with plates, lead plates soldered onto the top and bottom, a hole cut into the top with the cap soldered over it about 5 by 5 inches. There is some damage along one of the bottom seams. You can see here where the lead became stressed, either due to water infiltration or possibly extreme temperature changes, something like that. We're hoping that's had very minimal impact on the contents, whatever they may be. On top, you can see there are some markings. There are lines inscribed around the edges and then leading toward the center, which seem to be how the cap was placed in the plate, centered in the plate. And then the cap itself has this series of concentric rings that you can see here, a really interesting design, although we're not certain of any significance either to Kosciuszko or to the early academy for that. We did x-ray the box. The physics department used a portable high-power scanner x-ray machine to take some images of the contents. Because it's a lead box, we had to turn the power up really high on that x-ray machine. So unfortunately, we weren't able to capture the level of detail that we wanted to, but we were able to determine that there are some anomalies on the interior that we think may be some objects on the interior of the box. So that is promising.
Thanks, Paul. Can you walk us through some of the considerations being taken into account to open what we think might be a 194-year-old box, and how you will attempt to do it?
Sure. So as I mentioned, the box is lead, which is a contaminant, so we're going to take all of the necessary precautions. All of us touching the box and touching the contents, we will be wearing gloves. As we open it, Kevin and I will be wearing N95 masks, and we do have a handheld vacuum with a HEPA filter standing by. So today we're going to start by removing this cap on the top, working our way around the edges using a chisel. Once we get that cap off, we will then assess the contents of the box and determine what, if anything, is safe to remove through the hole in the top. And we'll start taking those items out one by one. If there's anything on the interior that's either too large or too fragile, we will have to use a different approach. At that point, we will enter from the bottom and begin removing the bottom plate, which is before, as I mentioned, there's some damage here along the seam, so we can use that to begin working our way around that seam using a chisel or shears, and remove the plate from the body itself and expose the contents.
Great, thank you. Let's see what's in that box.
You bet.
So many in our audience may be asking why the Military Academy has a statue to Thaddeus Kosciuszko and why it's so significant to our history. The monument is actually the third oldest on West Point, but for much of the last century, it was the oldest in the area of the plain. And unlike many of our monuments, it's never been moved from its original location. And so that's why this box actually hasn't been discovered until most recently.
Tadeusz Kościuszko was trained at the Royal Knight School in Warsaw and then studied engineering in Paris. And when he heard about the American colonists fighting for their rights, he sailed to the New World in June 1776 in order to volunteer his services to the Continental Army. After being recommended by Benjamin Franklin, Kościuszko was hired to work on the fortifications of Philadelphia. From there, he emplaced fortifications in the Northeast, finally ending up in New York. His employment of terrain, hasty fortifications, and overlapping fires was a significant factor to the Continental Army's win at the Battle of Saratoga in upstate New York in the fall of 1777. In the early spring of '78, General George Washington sent Kościuszko to this bend in the river called West Point to improve its fortification system. Kościuszko spent 28 months at West Point creating an interlocking fortification system that was later called the Gibraltar of the Hudson and solidified Washington's view that West Point was the key to America, and losing it would lead to the demise of the Continental Army and the end of the American Revolution. Kościuszko left West Point to join the Continental Army in the South just days before traitor Benedict Arnold took command of the West Point garrison with the intent to turn it over to the British.
What do we see?
Nothing quite yet, Jen. I just set it to one side over there.
There you go.
Oh.
It's empty.
You want to take a look, Mike?
Oh. I don't. It looks like it might have been something clay, maybe, or there's some kind
Well,
of.
that's what I'm wondering, if it's actually something that came apart, or if it's just mud that settled on the bottom, dust.
Yeah. And that curved shape tells me that it might have used to have been something.
Well, shall we
Paul and his panel of experts are discussing the best way
pull it
to
out?
find
Just
what may
kinda
be in the
seriously want to take a
box. We don't want to hurt anything that might be in there. If anything.
No. Yeah, I don't know what that would be. Could we use one of the trays? Okay.
Yeah. So Jen, I think you're able to see on the screen there, there are some items in the bottom. It appears to be, we're not certain if it's soil or mud or dust that's accumulated there and hardened. We're going to pull a piece out and see if we can get an idea of what it is. It may not be anything, but we're going to take a look.
All right, great. While Paul and Kevin are doing that and making sure everything's okay, We're going to turn to our panel of historians. Why do you believe it's important that the monument was placed here in 1829?
Thanks, Jen. As General Reeves pointed out, the importance of the monument, as with all monuments, is it's all about connections. Connections to the time in which a monument was built, connections to the thing, person, or time which it attempts to commemorate and memorialize, and connections to the future. I think it is important that to the Corps of Cadets, at the time that they were establishing this monument, Revolutionary War memorialization was becoming more democratic. In the same year that they choose to dedicate a memorial to Kosciuszko, the citizens of Boston were laying the cornerstone to the Bunker Hill Monument, the first one of its kind that was really dedicated to common soldiers who had fought there. And so by choosing to build a monument to Kosciuszko instead of, say, George Washington, they were connected to trends that were going on in society at the time. They also were trying to connect forward. I have part of a letter here from Benjamin Latrobe to Cadet Thompson, chairman of the committee that selected it, that by putting this monument above Fort Clinton, while your river flows and your country exists, no one will be at a loss to understand the monument, its purpose, and its location. And to some extent, that rings true. We have hundreds of people in the auditorium today who still know who Kosciuszko is, and are still gathering here to celebrate his legacy.
It is incredible when you think about it. 1829, 194 years ago, they were removed from 1776 by only 53 years. The population of the United States was only 12.8 million. In 1829, John Quincy Adams was president, and then Andrew Jackson took the oath of office. 194 years. 194 years from now, it will be the year 2217. The United States will be 441 years old. I mean, the connection, they are making a connection between themselves and the American Revolution. And they are passing it forward to us. And that's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
What I like about what this project has brought to light is not as much about what we do know, but what we still don't know. So we don't actually know who made up the committee of cadets that chose Thaddeus Kosciuszko to be memorialized. We know the committee that was there for the laying of the cornerstone, but we don't actually know who was involved in this selection. And they didn't leave a written record as to why they selected Thaddeus Kosciuszko. We're 200 years removed from that decision, so we can guess. We can make some informed guesses about why that is. There were quite a few other people that cadets you would think would also want to remember, to memorialize at West Point. For example, Rufus Putnam. So we all have Fort Putnam here at the Academy. It's on what was back then known as Crown Hill. And Rufus Putnam was the first engineer of the Continental Army. He was American, from Massachusetts. And it was his Massachusetts regiment, the 5th Massachusetts, that built that fort. But they built that fort at the direction of Thaddeus Kosciuszko. In fact, it was Kosciuszko that highlighted that high point on the ground, contrary, actually, to his commanding general. So Major General McDougal didn't think that they needed to fortify that spot. And Thaddeus Kosciuszko, who had just come from the loss of Fort Ticonderoga the year prior, said, no, we absolutely do, and convinced his commander that that was correct. But still, we don't have a record of the discussions that were held. We obviously didn't have a record of this box. There's a lot that's still left for us to uncover, and I find it fascinating that even at this point in time, there's still more work to be done by historians and archaeologists to understand what was going on here at the Academy in its early years. And I think that's important.
I think what Colonel Scully just said suggests the nature of history, right? History
is always discovering more and finding new connections and new contexts. And you could say things getting more complicated, but as they get more complicated, you see new angles, new dimensions, new perspectives. And that's kind of the fun of history. So to me, the connection that stands out here is that Kosciuszko was an international figure, right? He wasn't an American. He wasn't, they didn't choose George Washington. They didn't choose Thomas Jefferson. They didn't choose one of the Adamses, someone, maybe obvious from the generation of the Founding Fathers. But really, they chose someone who could embody the connections the American Revolution had to revolution, to democracy, to the fight for freedom around the world. Kosciuszko had fought for freedom against the Russians occupying Poland, right? He would have done that again if he had the chance. And so he really was, not just an engineer, not just a military leader, not just a revolutionary. He's all of those things. He's really the George Washington of his country.
Thank you so much for those insights, gentlemen. Paul, do you want to give us an update?
Sure, Jen. So the box didn't quite meet expectations. There is a layer of silt, that's what we were removing here, that settled in the bottom. As I mentioned before, the bottom had bowed out. It appears to have been from moisture penetration. We don't want to think that they went to all the trouble to put this box in the monument and not put anything in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to collect all the silt at a later point. We'll screen it through a fine mesh screen to see if we can find any remains in it and determine what, if anything, was in here. Potentially it was something small and organic that may have come apart over time, but we're just not certain. We did, however, Mike found on the lid here, there is a stamp from the manufacturer, E.W. Bank, New York. That name does not ring a bell to me, but so that is another clue that we might be able to track down and find some records about what was going on here with the time capsule.
All right, thank you for that.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the speech at the monument's dedication. And so the printed version of Cadet Charles Pettigrew details the estimation the cadets held for Kosciuszko and their future service to the nation, and with these last final words. Fellow cadets, while we join our homage to that which he has already so universally received, and endeavor to associate more closely his name with this place, with which it is already associated by revolutionary reminiscences, and to render memorable the secluded spot to which, when his official duties would permit, he delighted to retire, that his soul might expand in contemplating the majesty of the works of creation, and where he caused the rose, the lily, and the violet to bloom amidst the grandeur of the highland scenery. Like his own amiable and simple giving virtues, the side of his more resplendent and exalted qualities of the soldier, the patriot, and the statesman, let us remember that we, too, are the soldiers of a republic, that as such we owe the same debt which was by him so nobly acquitted. And proud of the high distinction, let it ever be our ambition to act worthily of it. Let us learn from him that glory in great and honorable undertakings is not dependent upon success, that he who bravely dares for the good of his country, with a willingness to sacrifice himself to her interest, whatever may be the fate of his enterprise or his own, is always sure of his reward in a people's gratitude and the world's applause.
Thank you, Devin. I am sure some in our audience have questions for our various experts up on stage. If you would please go to the microphone stand in the aisles, we would like to hear your questions. No questions? Well, we have a couple of questions for our history panel. Oh, did I miss? I heard that General Lafayette came to West Point in 1825, which was right around the time that the Monument Committee was forming their process in figuring out the design. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Marquis de Lafayette, great hero of the American Revolution, came to the United States as a 17-year-old to volunteer his services in the Continental Army. In anticipation of the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the war in 1775, embarked on this tour around the United States, and he came to West Point in 1824 and again in 1825, and he was greeted by thousands of people. Thousands came here to welcome him, and so very clearly, I think, the American Revolution is on their minds. Of course, July 4th, 1826, is not only the 50th anniversary of the ratification of the Declaration of Independence, but amazingly, that is the day that both Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and John Adams, in some ways the mind, the mouth of the cause of independence, both of them die on the same day, the 50th anniversary of independence. And that occasion is marked here at West Point. So I think the American Revolution is very much on their minds.
Thank you, Professor McDonald. I think we're about ready to wrap things up here. We wish there had been more in the box, but we have some folks to thank.
While the base was being disassembled at the end of May this year, West Point Association of Graduates employee Chris Branson saw the box, secured it, and notified Paul of the finding. Mr. Branson, would you please stand so we can thank you for recognizing that a plain gray box could actually be a treasure?
We hope you enjoyed seeing what's in the box with us today here at West Point as we uncover history. A huge thank you to our Public Affairs Office and their multimedia team for all your support leading up to and during today's event. Join us on May 4th, 2024 for the annual ceremony honoring Kościuszko by the American Association of Friends of Kościuszko at West Point.
So on your way out of the auditorium, please be sure to stop by the tables in the foyer manned by our West Point Museum and USMA Library Special Collections staff. There are original artifacts from both Kościuszko and the Academy from the 1820s, to include Superintendent Thayer's uniform coat and letters between the Cadet Committee and the monument designer John Latrobe. Go Army!